Yeah, pulling in a nana. Lumaranatana, Truana, Wukalina, Yingina, Kutalaina, Nipaluna, Kunani, Kaparati, Lailatia, Krikipara, Militina Pakana, Pakana Tunapri, Luralatipina, Muta, Purinina, Kaparunini, Pakana, Krakapaka. I hope you saw some of that or heard some of that at least. So welcome to you all. Tasmanian Aboriginal people knew well this whole island. They knew, and we know, Cape Grim, Robbins Island, West Point, Muscle Row Bay, Cape Barren Island, Bay of Fires, Great Lake, Jordan River, the area on which Hobart now sits, and Kununyi, Mount Wellington, Adventure Bay, Research Bay, as far south as the Matsaika Island Group. Militina Pakana, this was and remains Tasmanian Aboriginal land, known to all of us. Pakana Tunapri, Luralapina, Mutta, Purinina, Kaparanina, Pakana Krakapaka. Our people knew the giant freshwater crayfish, the birds, the Tasmanian devil, the Tasmanian tiger. Then our old people were killed. Today, loggers and others devastate our lands, destroying our lands as we once knew them. But we remember these lands as our own. We remember the resources that they contain, and we know that they are vital to our preservation as a people. So Yapulingana, welcome to all of you who want to join with us in making a sustainable future on our lands for all people. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather Sculthorpe from the Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre. What searing words are so appropriate to the situation we face with this massive town hall meeting today. Thank you everybody for joining, even in this pandemic. And we hope and wish you all well and safety for you and your loved ones. But here we are, 2,000 people gathered, the biggest town hall meeting ever for Tasmania's forests, making virtue of the virtual. And it's so important that we're doing this. I thank Molly and Jenny and everybody whose technological wizardry has got us together for this. Look, we are in a world where in 2014, the New York Forest Agreement was signed to end all logging of and destruction of forests by 2030. Since then, the rate of destruction has increased, however. In Africa, it's doubled. And here in Tasmania, which has one of the most intact forest domains, despite all, left on Earth, the government is hell-bent on increasing the rate of destruction. And today, April the 8th, marks the day which under government legislation of Premier Gutwein now, 356,000 hectares, that's 356,000 soccer fields of high conservation value forests. They're full of wildlife, great variety of woodlands, rainforest, the tallest flowering forests on Earth, is being opened up. And as the Minister for Forests down here says, welcoming loggers to go in there. They're just waiting for applications. Now our job is to stop that. There is no need for this. Australia has more than 2.5 million hectares of plantations, which is more than enough to meet all our wood needs. We simply have no need to be destroying these forests. It's based on the false economics of public subsidy, keeping an industry going to largely export as wood chips and as veneer the Tasmanian forests to overseas purposes, which again could be met by plantation forests these days. In these forests in Tasmania, and as you saw from those maps, don't worry too much about the detail, a great array of wildlife, many of it facing extinction. For example, the swift parrot, the fastest parrot on Earth, which migrates between the mainland and Tasmania. They're just leaving now to go back to the mainland for the winter, is listed as critically endangered in Tasmania by the government in Canberra and by the United Nations. But here we have the Tasmanian government opening more swift parrot nesting sites to logging destruction, largely for wood chips, although 60% is left on the ground and burnt when they come across drop-in centuries after the logging's finished. And the aim of that, the firestorm, is to stop the forest returning. It's to kill the cotyledons, the little shoots and seeds in the forest. There you can see, that's just a week or two ago. This process of firestorming the forest which has been logged so that the native forest can't come back again when they plant the plantations for future wood production, which means that the forest will never grow back to more than 100 years old because they'll be cut before then, so no nesting sites will return. It's a prescription for extinction in this age of global extinction of wildlife. And the same for the Tasmanian devil, the same for the eastern native quoll and the bigger spotted-tailed quoll. The Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle, which 3 metres across, up to 3 metres across, is larger than its mainland cousin. You see top right there, the swift parrot. In the middle on the right, the white goshawk, says grey there, but they're white in Tasmania. They're grey on the mainland. The only completely white raptor on the planet. And so much more being destroyed before our very eyes by criminal legislation. It's up to us to stand against that. One little bit of good news, due to some sharp-eyed spotting by young people out in the Florentine Valley, noted illegal logging under the government, under this Gutwein government and under the Canberra Environment Minister's watch, of logging on cave country under Mount Field in the last week. I hear this morning that backtracking very fast is the forestry authorities who say, oh, we're going to reduce that logging to about 10 or 15% of what we were going to do. Now, only caught out in that illegal operation by sharp-eyed environmentalists. We need much more from everybody. We need everybody to come and see Tasmania's forests when you can. That's the first thing, because to see them is to want to save them. That tree in the top left of the screen now has been saved by those young people out there, spotted it. It's on cave country. It's on what's called karst. It should not be logged. It was marked for logging. They've got a tape around it, 17 metres around its girth at the base. Full of wildlife up there, will now be saved due to their sharp-eyed action. But after that comes the public campaigning, the contacting of our politicians, the funding of action-oriented organisations, and ultimately peaceful direct action. And we'll hear more from that from Lisa at the end of today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Virginia Young. Virginia contributes through the Australian Forest Conservation Society to global research on forests. She's been a great campaigner with the Wilderness Society and others for decades now. Welcome, Virginia.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to join an action like this, and it may be a precursor of many more to come, I hope. For those of you who don't know, I was asked to speak a little bit about where this process came from that led to 356,000 hectares of forests now, well, sitting in reserve for 8 years and now being put on the logging block. So it was part of an agreement that was reached by environment and other stakeholders and the state and federal governments 8 years ago, called the Tasmanian Independent Verification Process. Governments and all stakeholders agreed to be bound by the outcomes of that process, and the outcomes of that process included validation of the claims by the conservation movement that 572,000 hectares that they had nominated for addition to the reserve system warranted that reservation. The conservation assessments, even though they were limited because they were restricted to that 572,000 hectares of public land, so they missed out on private land and they missed out on quite a few important areas of public native forest as well. But despite that, it was a world-class independent assessment. It didn't go back to trying to address the failings of the RFA. It looked to the future, and the assessments were really based on best practice at that time, based on best practice around World Heritage Management and also biodiversity conservation. And they revealed some truly remarkable things. I learned a lot through that process. So my job was really to support conservation stakeholders, but also Professor Brendan Mackey, who designed the conservation assessment for the independent verification process, and oversaw the variety of conservation work. And all that work is still available. It's still available on the Commonwealth Government website. We've sent a link through to Jenny so they can be accessed. And even if all you read is the conservation summary report, I urge you to do so, because the image, well, what I learned about Tasmania was not only are the forests grand and beautiful and majestic, unlike any others on earth, they really do protect extraordinary diversity and ancient lineages of biodiversity and evolutionary history. They're quite remarkable. And that diversity extends to these strange little jumps in genetics that occur across the state. They're called parapatric boundaries. I'd never heard of them. But it means that the genetics of the regnans or the devils in the west are quite different to the genetics of the same species in the east. And that genetic diversity has never really been captured or properly protected in Tasmania. It also made really clear to me that the underlying biodiversity in the tall wet forests on the boundary of the World Heritage Area is this globally significant fungal and invertebrate diversity that underpins their productivity. It makes them such big giant trees. And on the east coast, it's in the eucalypts and the birds and quite a different kind of diversity. So when people say Tasmania is a biological wonderland, it's absolutely true. So when you look at, where we are 8 years on, and the thought that these forests are going to be opened up for logging is appalling. And it's particularly appalling given that the world has moved on again in those 8 years. What do we know now? We know that climate change is far more extreme than we anticipated, that the vulnerability of our forests to severe drought and extreme fire is far greater than we ever expected at this point in our history. And we know with absolute certainty that the best thing that we can do is to protect our older forests and to restore those forests that have been logged, to improve their integrity. That's the best thing we can do for to help fight climate change and to protect biodiversity. The other thing we've learned in this time is we face two global crises, not just a climate crisis, but a biodiversity crisis, and that the two crises are linked. And in fact, globally now, which is where I work, I kind of work in the international policy space on these issues, we know now we cannot solve the climate crisis without solving the biodiversity crisis. And when you tackle climate change in land and forests, you must do so in ways, and you can only do so if you're protecting and restoring biodiversity. Nature-based solutions are the new buzzword internationally, and it amazes me that Tasmania and no government in Australia really has looked at that as a pathway for global leadership and something they could be proud of. Tasmania could protect what are some of the most carbon-dense forests on Earth and provide a global biodiversity legacy for all Australians and the rest of the world. And that's where we need to take the federal and the state government. We need to build that understanding and to make sure that that legacy for climate and for biodiversity not just remains intact, but is improved. There's quite a bit of restoration that's needed across the native forest estate and in other parts of the Tasmanian landscape. And that's our challenge, is to protect and restore the natural world, to help fight climate change and protect our extraordinary environmental legacy. So that's all I've really got to say, but I will like to welcome Peg Putt, someone I've worked with for many years in the climate space in particular. Peg, as you all know, was leader of the Greens. She founded and was the former head of Markets for Change. And now she leads a global network fighting the most absurd new threat to forests globally, which is to burn them for power in the name of renewable and carbon neutral energy. Peg leads that fight very ably, and thank God we've got her. Thank you, Peg.
Thank you, Virginia. So there you have it. These magnificent forests have outstanding and immensely significant natural values. In a time of climate crisis and biodiversity crisis, as Virginia said, these are things we simply cannot afford to lose. They're also of immense importance to all of us for their restorative value, places to feel uplifted, connected to nature. So many of us are currently grieving our inability to get out into the wild places as we obey important social distancing rules. We've been hearing people give voice to what a place of solace our forests are. Also great for recreation, of course, for exercise, fresh air, relaxation, and the beauty. Wonder from the smallest fungi to the tallest of tall trees. So what can be done? Where are our sources of hope? In so many ways, the answer is with you. We elect governments, all of us, and members of parliament, and call on them to ensure forest protection and to build an economy not based in environmental destruction. Today, the Tasmanian government is letting us down. Today marks the start. We now enter a period in which the loggers can put forward a formal request to log inside these places previously designated by law to become permanent secure conservation reserves. Would you buy wood products sourced from such destruction? I assume not. If you knew, if you remembered to ask when you go shopping for furniture or wood for building and odd jobs around the home or paper. The role of the consumer has become very important in achieving environmental change. Think for a moment about the big changes taking place on the use of plastic. When awareness was raised about the appalling impacts and massive volumes in our oceans and ecosystems, individuals led the way. One by one, we refused plastic bags. We started taking reusable cups with us to the coffee shop. Aware and adventurous retailers began to follow. They changed their stock and their practices. And then regulators have been following that, setting new standards for society. If we'd simply waited for regulators to lead the way, things wouldn't be moving nearly so fast. So pressure for consumers is very important in the marketplace. And there are advantages for companies that set high environmental and social standards. You might remember when the forest negotiations in Tasmania had agreed a moratorium on logging these very forests, so a big agreement could be thrashed out, one company refused, pleading that they required a supply of logs from the high conservation value areas. That was Tar Ann. This was so unreasonable that we went to their customer companies in Japan and explained the situation. To cut a long story short, those customers were appalled to discover just where their plywood components were coming from. They saw the sort of pictures you've seen today. And especially appalled because they've been told they were coming from plantations. Contracts were cancelled. Tar Ann rapidly fell into line. So what of the companies getting logs from Tasmania's forests these days? Where do they stand? They're playing a double game. On one hand, some have said they won't take wood from the future potential production forest, being aware of the probable impact on their image and hopefully of the unacceptable environmental destruction. However, the Forest Industries Association of Tasmania, which represents those same companies, has been in backroom discussions for more than 2 years with the Tasmanian government over getting access to those same forests. We know this because of documents obtained by the Greens under a right to information request. Although the legislated annual quota of native forest saw logs is not even being utilised, they're claiming there's not enough. The initial push is for 60,000 to 120,000 hectares of the future potential production forests, and who knows how much more to come. This is there in black and white, an ongoing series of meetings and the development of a case for logging. Beware the weasel words of government. It's not yet formalised. Couldn't be until the 8th of April came around, and it will have hoops to go through. But the intention is irrefutable. We have to make a lot of noise. Make sure the world knows that we will fight again to secure these forests, that we care deeply, and that in these times, to log these places is just criminal. Companies in the supply chain need to understand that this could blow back on them. Think about what you buy. Start asking exactly where the wood you buy comes from. Be insistent. Don't accept ignorance as an answer. Today, the Wilderness Society has revealed a letter from Bunnings who say, and I quote, Bunnings will neither source nor sell wood from the future potential production forest in Tasmania. Bunnings has also sought confirmation from its Tasmanian suppliers that they will not source from the previously protected areas. Well, good on Bunnings. This is an important move. We now need to step up the pressure on all the retailers, not limited to hardware stores, but furniture shops and so on, and the timber companies themselves. So speak up, take action, make it personal, and we can save these forests again. So now that's it from me, and my great pleasure is to introduce Christine Milne. Christine Milne AO is a long-term environmental activist, former leader of the Australian Greens, former Vice President of the IUCN, and currently Global Greens Ambassador. Take it away, Christine.
Thanks very much, Peg, and hi everyone. It's terrific to be in contact, although somewhat distanced, to talk about Tasmania's forests. As you know, I've been a forest activist for 30 years, as many of you have, and I've taken a particular interest in the rorts and corruption that I've seen over that time as governments support native forest logging. In the Tasmanian case, there has been one certainty over that period, regardless of whether a Liberal or Labor government has been in power in Tasmania or nationally. That certainty is the squandering of taxpayer dollars propping up native forest logging, even when reducing or getting out of native forest logging was supposed to be the aim. Close to $1 billion have been thrown at the industry over that time. Yet, Forestry Tasmania, now reinvented as Sustainable Timbers Tasmania, continues to make big losses, destroying our forests. According to the Tasmanian accountant John Lawrence, the Tasmanian Regional Forest Agreement from 1997 to 2017 delivered a $1.3 billion loss in what can only be described as a giant fraud on taxpayers. Forestry Tasmania's total cash losses were $454 million over 20 years, with a write-down of $751 million in value of the forest estate. Not only did the RFA fail to deliver its promised ecological and economic sustainability aims, it has driven species like the swift parrot closer to extinction. This is in spite of the fact that no industry or any industry participants anywhere that I know of in the country have ever received the largesse that the forest industry has. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about from Robin Gray to John Howard to Julia Gillard, right through Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, Scott Morrison. It's all the same, and the same at the state level. People have been paid to get into the forest industry, paid to get out of the forest industry, paid to get in again, paid to get out again, and we're about to witness going in again. Now, how is this possible? Well, fundamentally, the rorts are possible in the native forest industry because it's a closely networked old boys club. They're part of a revolving door. It goes around and around from company directors to peak body spokespeople, as Peg has just suggested, to CFMEU, to political party candidates, ministerial advisors, and back again. And whenever there's a crisis, they negotiate with one another and they determine, government to industry and back again, all the terms of reference for the payouts, and they drip feed. 10 million here, 100 million there for training programs, exit packages, restructuring, new job initiatives and so on. And we all know where it leads. Not much progress in terms of conservation. We all know, for example, that Evan Rowley, the former head of Forestry Tasmania, negotiated the contract with Tarn and then left Forestry Tasmania and went to Tarn as its CEO. But look at the current Director of Forestry Tasmania. You have Rob DeFairley as a founding director of Margles Groom Consulting, a forest and forest industry consulting company based in Australia and New Zealand. He's co-chair of the Commonwealth Government's Forest Industry Advisory Council with Senator the Honourable Anne Ruston. He's also the forestry representative on the Agricultural Industry Advisory Council, chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister, etc., etc. Now, this is the man responsible for delivering the second RFA, which was signed in 2017. And that's why I'm asking everyone today, if you would please go straight from this webinar, Google EPBC Act Review and send in to abolish the RFAs. Put in a review and abolish the RFAs. When I led the Senate inquiry into these rorts, in the forest industry, what it demonstrated was that the money that went to the contractors was absolutely failed in any sense to restructure the industry, because many of those contractors just took the money, handed the businesses over to their sons or brothers or uncles, and the industry kept on. Perhaps one of the worst rorts was that the Commonwealth Government knew that as soon as they were paying the contractors to free up logging volumes, Forestry Tasmania picked up those volumes again, such that in the hearings, one of the contractors said, so far there's 7.1 million that the department has paid for no value whatsoever. So exit to the logging contractors doesn't mean exit. It just means take the money, restructure, go to the mainland, log there for a few years and come back. And one of the terms of taking the exit packages in 2011 was that in 10 years you can come back again. So all of these people are sitting there now ready to gear up to go back into the logging industry. Now, I sought police intervention to actually have some of these rorts and people rorting the system charged. Eventually in 2015 a few were charged, but largely they got away with it, mainly because the Commonwealth was so slack in the guidelines they wrote that the loopholes were so large that they literally could drive their log trucks straight through them. What we can now say is that the forest industry in Tasmania remains a heavily networked, tight club, very well connected to state and federal government, and expecting to have more taxpayer dollars, because the Gutwein government is ideologically driven to expand native forest logging and will subsidise it. And we know that those remaining contractors are ready to get back into the industry. So what we have to do is make it perfectly clear to all political parties that in the species extinction and climate and biodiversity crisis, we won't tolerate even $1 of our taxes subsidising native forest logging. Secondly, we have to make it clear to the government at both federal and state level that we will not be open to compensating or paying exit packages again to those in the industry who go back into or expand their native forest logging operations. There needs to be an audit right now of all the businesses and contractors who are engaged in the forest industry in Tasmania, so the record is clear. The United Nations Decade of Ecosystem Restoration begins next year. We should be putting money into restoring degraded forests rather than continuing to destroy them. And finally, brand Tasmania, where are you? Silent as usual. And this time, it's very clear again that this initiative by the logging industry to go back into the forest will undermine the Tasmanian brand, whereas they could actually, brand Tasmania, come out and call for the permanent protection of our forests, an end to native forest logging, and the promotion of Tasmania as a solution to the climate crisis. So again, Don't forget, go and put in a response to the EPBC Act review to stop native logging, end the RFAs. And on that note, I want to hand over to someone who has been a fantastic activist and is an activist right now in Tasmania's forests, protecting all that we hold dear. Her name is Dr. Lisa Searle. Apart from spending time in the Congo each year as part of Médecins Sans Frontières, she's a person of great courage who's out in the bush cooking for the camps, putting her body on the line. So over to you, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Christine. Wow, what an amazing thing that we've got going on here. It's such a pleasure to be speaking amongst such an incredible and influential group of people. And it's amazing to have so many people out there, even with the restrictions that we've currently got in place. And it's amazing that people are still there and people are still paying attention to what's happening in the forest. Unfortunately, despite the pandemic that's going on at the moment, clear felling of Tasmania's native forests has not slowed down. And I have been out there on the front line. I've been out there in the forest up until about a week ago when we were forced to rethink our strategies given the current, oh sorry, I think we're having talking. Despite the pandemic, the Sustainable Timber Tasmania are continuing business as usual. They were before. They haven't modified their operations at all. And it's quite frustrating that we are being forced to adapt, and we will adapt. We will continue the fight, and we will continue doing whatever we can as long as they are clear felling native. We will be there, highlighting what they're doing and trying to get them out of those forests, because there is absolutely no reason why they should be doing that. But we need to end native forest logging now, yesterday. The need couldn't be more urgent, and we're losing forests at an unprecedented rate all around the globe. Tasmania's forests are incredibly significant, in amazing places for so many reasons, and we need to protect them. I would like to give you guys a little bit of an update of what's been happening in the campaign on the front line over the last few months. So I've spent a lot of time on the front line over the last few months, and since October we've actually had 32 arrests, 3 of which have been myself, and we've blockaded in a number of places, and we've had a number of small successes in that time, which has been amazing. So we have continued to maintain our sumac blockades. They won't be going into log that particular forest this year. So we've been blockading the sumac forest now for 2 years, and we have had hundreds of people through that camp, hundreds of people that have spent time at that camp and experienced that rainforest. And it is such an amazing place and an amazing experience to be there. We unfortunately have seen some destruction in other parts of the Tarkine. So we had some machines move into Kew Road, which is an incredible area of really ancient rainforest, and machines moved in. We were there to stop them, and in the end they left, having taken less than half of what they wanted to take, which was good, and we watched the machines move out of there. And we moved from there to the Boko region of the southern Tarkine, where there was an active logging coupe there. They took less than 5% of what they wanted to, and once we got in there and started blockading, we were only in there for about 5 days, and then they moved the machines out, so that was amazing. We've also stopped work for 3 days in the Wentworth Hills region. So some of you may have been aware of this as well. So Wentworth Hills is an area near Derwent Bridge. It's the site of Tasmania's largest scale clear felling of native forest, and that is ongoing, and we are still fighting that battle. There's still machines in there working in 3 active coups at the moment, and we've been providing support in the last couple of weeks to community groups in Aldina and in Laconia, also in the northwest. And these community groups are fighting to protect remnant native forests in their areas, and we've been able to lend support to them, which has been fantastic. We've also done a blockade of Tartan Smithton Veneer Mill and occupied Sustainable Timber Tasmania head office in Hobart. And yes, it's been an amazing summer. It's been the biggest direct action summer that we've had for years, and it's been really exciting to be a part of that and to be really at the forefront of that. And we have had so many new and old activists come on board, and we've done a lot of skill shares and workshops and that sort of thing as well. So it's just been amazing. I've been involved in campaigning for Tasmania's forests since about 2007, since the Upper Florentine blockade, and it's just been, it's such a roller coaster. You lose places, you win places. I've seen so many places lost, and I think one of my favourite things is seeing people experience these forests and experience these places for the first time, and then the realisation that they can actually do something about it, that people can become empowered and do something to fight against the destruction of those places. And on the flip side of the coin, I think there's nothing more devastating than standing in a fresh clear fell or walking into a place that I knew and loved and seeing that it has been destroyed or that it is smouldering from recent regeneration burns. And I don't think you ever get used to seeing stuff like that. And I spend so much of my time out in these forests and in these threatened forests, and seeing places lost and seeing places being actively destroyed. Through everything, despite this pandemic, despite the hurdles, despite the difficulties that we face on the front line, we are not going to stop. And as long as Tasmania's native forests are being clear-felled, we will be there. We'll be there making sure that people know what's going on, making sure that we're doing everything we can to get them out of native forests. And today marks this horrible date, April the 8th, when this 356,000 hectares of forest that we thought was protected is being opened up for logging. And yeah, we're still waiting to see what this is going to look like, and in reality, how much of this forest is really going to get turned into the permanent timber production zone. And what we want is none of it. We want an end to native forest logging. We want Sustainable Timber Tasmania, Ta'an, Xinjiang, Britton Brothers. We want all these companies out of native forests now. It has to be now. There is an urgency in all of this, because every day that goes by, more trees are falling. There are trees out there today in old growth native forests that are being felled, and we can do something about it. So please get in touch. We are adapting, obviously, with this pandemic. We have to find new ways to operate, and we will adapt, and we will continue to fight this battle. We're not done, and we're not going into hiding. We're still here. So some things that you can do from home right now to try to make a difference and to try to end native forest logging in Tasmania. We want you to jump onto social media as soon as you leave this rally. Don't wait, because then you'll forget about it and you'll get distracted doing something else. So as soon as you get off this rally, please get onto social media, take a photo of yourself and your household with a sign saying Save Tassie's Forest. It doesn't have to be a complicated sign. Post it to social media, write a status update about why you think this 356,000 hectares needs protection and why you think native forest logging in Tasmania needs to stop. Tag Premier Peter Gutwein, virtually check into his office on Facebook. You can also write directly to Premier Gutwein and ask for secure protection of Tasmania's forests. You can also ring up ABC Radio Talkback. It's a really powerful thing to do. Write letters to the newspaper, letters to the editor. All of that sort of thing is really useful and is putting pressure on the government to show them how many of us there are. They need to know how many people care. They need to know how many people are out there participating in this rally and how passionate we are and how much we're willing to do to make sure that we see an end to native forest logging. So I would now like to introduce a very special guest. So this is someone I've admired for many years and whose music has brought so much joy and happiness to my life. And a lot of inspiration. And many years ago now, this man climbed a giant tree in the Styx Valley with his grandfather's guitar and played a song from the top of the tree set platform. So I would like to welcome the incredible John Butler. He's here to perform a song for us today. So thanks so much for being here, John. And thank you everybody for participating in this rally. This has just been amazing, and it's a privilege to be speaking to you all.
Hello, thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all that you do. It's amazing to hear from you on the front line. It's always been people like yourself who just absolutely floor me and inspire me with your massive capacity to protect what's so beautiful and so cherished to all of us. And it definitely inspires me in my music and what I do. I just want to double check that everybody can hear everything. All right. Hopefully you can. And I'm gonna play a song. I'm gonna play a song called "Treat Your Mama with Respect" or "Treat Your Mama." About 20 years ago, I went to the Styx Valley in Tasmania to protect the forest that was being clear-felled there for the same reasons that have been spoken about by all the amazing speakers. And I'd like to give big props to all those speakers, Heather and Bob and Virginia and Peg and Christine and Lisa once again, and also a big shout out to Jenny for helping hook this all together. And I took this guitar up, at the time it was the world's largest tree sit. It's about 100 meters high. I'm not too sure if they've gone any higher since then, but I went up there with this guitar, which is my grandfather's guitar, a man who I'm named after, and I sang this song. And I'm proud and privileged to be here to sing this song on this guitar for this beautiful country, that sacred country. And at the same time, I'm a little dumbfounded that 20 years later, we're still here fighting what I could see as criminal activity, like a lot of the speakers have said today, absolute criminal activity. What we know about climate change, what we know about our watersheds and our water catchment, the extinction rate, and just the simple fact that we have enough sustainable timber industry already in this country. And then Christine just blew my mind about the insider, just the insider good old boys, nepotism within the industry back and forth. It is literally blatantly criminal activity. And it's something that's always really gotten to me at the depth of it. As much as I love the environment, I love trees, I love animals, the injustice and the blatant criminal activity just absolutely upsets me, because we subsidize these criminals, which none of us want to do. That's not what we were taught to do by our parents or our elders or our teachers. Anyway, it's an honor to be part of this great cohort of people. I encourage all of you to do exactly what Lisa said, and get on the Premier of Tasmania's Facebook and send him letters, and tag him, send a photo with you and your family to save these beautiful native forests of Tasmania. This is some of the most biodiverse and amazing places on this planet. Nothing you don't already know. Sounds better with headphones. got a recipe here, you know I can cook and I come over on the good intent. You know I am heaven bound by the surely open on getting, but I don't like I know I should get the job done like my mama told you. Only one thing can remember, she said you gotta earn all of your respect. And I don't care the race of a color or creed. I said all that shit don't bother me. Only one thing that you shouldn't neglect, you gotta treat your mom with respect. And I don't give a fashion style and the hell don't care about the car of blues. Only one thing that you shouldn't neglect, you gotta treat your mama with respect. Treat your mama with respect. You better treat your mama with respect. Slap you upside down the head. You don't treat your mama with respect. Treat your mama with respect. You better treat your mama with respect. Slap you upside down the head. You don't treat your mama. Treat your mama, yeah. Treat your mama. Treat your mama, I got a couple of friends up in the tree and the sticks. You know they're doing their part, you know they're doing their bit. Trying to save our mother from all this greed. You know they know what she wants, you know they know what she needs. I got a couple of sisters in South Australia, stopping the radio from coming up. Oh yeah, you know they know what she needs. They're stopping all of that government. Treat your mama with respect. Treat your mama with respect. Slap you upside down the head. Treat your mama with respect. Treat your mama with respect. Treat your mama with respect. Slap you upside down the head. Don't treat your mama. Treat your mama, yeah. Treat your mama, yeah. Treat your mama. Thank you, one and all, for turning up. It's amazing how many people have turned up. Thank you to Heather and Bob and Virginia and Peg and Jenny and Christine and Elisa. And yeah, let's do it together and save Tasmania's native forests because they are so special to us all. Much love to each and every one of you. And peace out. Now what?
Bye.